This is Katie, co-host of Coffee with Keith and Katie. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi, this is Emily.
This is Lindsay.
And this is Elizabeth,
co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Once you are done with this episode, we hope you'll come check out our show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk nerdy to you about fandoms, fan fiction, and all pop culture for nerds that you can think of. A new show comes out every Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Brice, we're going to cover a couple topics today. We're going to do some coaching talk over in England and down in Australia. We're also going to talk U.S., France, and the Asian Cup.
Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast.fm. As podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world, being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files, then uploaded to the host computer, allowing some great audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to Squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. Let's start off with that international flair. Let's start off with the women's friendly, because that's the one-off game that I think is good. But the U.S. women's national team started their pre-World Cup season for 2019, and they did something in that game that they didn't do all of 2018, and that was lose. They lost 3-1 in an away game to France, in France, at one of the stadiums they're going to play in. But it was a disappointing loss, but understandable in a lot of ways for the Americans. What did you take out of this game, Yvonne?
I took that France are taking this very seriously. They are the host nation for this coming World Cup. I was really impressed by how hungry they were from the game. And I think the U.S. kind of struggled to match the intensity in which the France national team was playing for. And I don't think it's a panic button or anything for the U.S. national team. They did kind of switch up their lineup for what you would think would be their opening starting lineup for the World Cup. But it is a nice reminder of the talent that the rest of these teams have. And, you know, you can't – and it's a good wake-up call for them, too, to get a loss early in the year. It's a good way to kind of refocus them and, you know, remind them that they're not unbeatable.
I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, when you look at how this game was played off, in the 9th minute, France was already on the board. It took stoppage time in the second half before the U.S. finally scored from Lloyd. I think the flip side of this, though, is that this was an acceptable loss in my mind, not only for what you described, but you're also without a number of players. Rapinoe, Heath, Ertz, O'Hara, they're all out on injury. Tierna Davidson made her first appearance after she broke her ankle last season with Stanford. So to have her back in the lineup now was, just critical experience for her. So I think, when you put those things together and you think about that this wasn't the best lineup that the United States was going to put together, and they still went out there and, take away 15 minutes of that game, you might have gotten a 1-1 draw. But ultimately, this is what you said. It's a wake-up call, and it shows, I think, a lot for the American fan base that France is going to be somebody to deal with as they try to double up on World Cup titles this year.
Yeah, and I think, there's not – I mean, you can never take friendlies too serious, I guess, in a way. The results from friendlies too serious, but, there are things maybe the team isn't as deep as it might be in years past, things of that kind of nature, I think you can take off. I don't think the midfield kind of looked really underwhelming yesterday and looked like they weren't able to keep up with the French team. So, and it's one of the few teams that I think will challenge the U.S. coming up this summer in the World Cup. And, they're going to have to play away games. They're essentially going to be away games anytime they play a European team this summer. So all in all, I think there's going to be some positive they can take from it. And again, a nice wake-up call for them to remind them that they're not unbeatable.
Let's switch over to the competitive side on the men's international circuit right now. The Asian Cup is going on. We've kind of pushed off until we got to the knockout rounds just because this is a six group one. Most of the teams that were going to be in there moved on from group stage. And we're now into that knockout round. Thailand, China, Iran, Oman, Jordan, Vietnam, Japan, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, United Arab Emirates, Kyrgyzstan, Australia, and Uzbekistan have made it along. And that sounds like a lot, but it's only 16 teams. Of that, China came back against Thailand to win 2-1. They moved along. They're now playing Iran, who did a lot better in the World Cup than I think a lot of people might recognize after they won 2-0 against Oman. And the other game that was played so far has been Vietnam needing penalty kicks to overcome Jordan. So there's a lot of things going on. That's kind of like what it's set up with the China-Iran matchup there. The winner of Japan and Saudi Arabia will face Vietnam. And then just the bottom half of the bracket still ready to go. Some of those matches will be decided by the time that this releases, including some really important ones here. With, again, that Australia-Uzbekistan game is one that I will be paying attention to very closely just because of how incredible that game will be. There's a lot of opportunities here. Since we haven't talked about the Asian Cup, what have been some of the storylines that you've noticed, Ivan, about things so far?
I think one thing for sure, I think it didn't need to be expanded to 24 teams, to be honest with you. And I think that's kind of why we held off on starting the tournament until the knockout stage. The quality in the Asian game just isn't there for there to be 24 teams, and I think you're seeing this a lot all over soccer with the Gold Cup's going to be expanded to 16 this summer. Euros was expanded to 24 last time as well. I think you kind of see the teams you kind of expected to doing well, and I think that's the most important thing. They're still Iran still hasn't allowed a goal all tournament. South Korea won their group, Japan won their group, and I think it's kind of, those three have kind of separated themselves, I thought, early on from the tournament to everybody else. You have other teams kind of in the fringe that like China, who is always, the joke is how can there be a country so large? How can they not come up with 11 soccer players to be on the field and be a good team? So I think teams like that, it's good for them to kind of them making it to the quarterfinals is a step at the program in the right direction. But I think for me, it's just been how the teams that you expect to do well, Japan, South Korea, how they've kind of they haven't been tripped up yet.
There's a couple other ones that I noticed, and that was Jordan. Jordan won Group B actually over Australia. They beat Australia in the group stage, and then Jordan goes out and loses to Vietnam. And Vietnam was the very last team to make it out of the group. They had just that goal differential tiebreaker. It wasn't even a goal differential. I believe it was less penalties taken to make it in over Lebanon to be that last spot in the knockout stages. And they go up and they beat Jordan, who had surprised a lot of people throughout the tournament with 2 wins and a draw in group stage, even against Australia. So that I thought is kind of surprising just in terms of the immediate factor. I did think it was in the long-term factor. I think India's fall flat on their face approach was definitely interesting too. I mean, after coming out so strongly in their first game and then I think they scored 1 goal in their last 2. No, they scored 4 goals in their first game against Thailand, and then they didn't score the rest of the tournament. this was supposed to be India's coming out party. India's made a number of improvements. They've expanded and dumped a ton of money into this program, because when you look at the Olympics, when you look at international sports competitions, with the exception of cricket and badminton, the countries of India and Bangladesh have the most people compared to the least amount of hardware, whether that be Olympic medals or these other kind of tournaments. So India was trying to change that and go out there, because this was a very competitive group. UAE ended up winning it with just 5 points because they had 1 win and 2 draws. And Thailand and Bahrain have both shown to be pesky in their own routes. But to have India fall flat on their face, I thought was a big storyline involved with this Asian Cup so far that didn't go too well for all things considered. I am also kind of interested to see some of these other matches that pop up. I mean, with Iraq and Qatar. I mean, Qatar is hosting the World Cup in a couple of years. There's a lot of people paying attention to them. They've got a really important game against Iraq, and Iraq is, I think it was London that they did really well at the Olympics. They've kind of surprised a couple of people that way. They won the Asian Cup, I believe, the last time it happened. So there's a number of good players on that Iraqi team going up against Qatar, which is going to be a surprise one. And then ultimately that Uzbekistan game, will Uzbekistan be more like Jordan, or will they be more like an actual contender sitting there against Australia? And that's going to be a really interesting game to see how that kind of comes along.
Yeah, I really like the bracket set up really nicely for there to be, in really interesting semifinal matchups, possibly with Iran against possibly Japan and South Korea against Australia, if the favorites kind of win out. But which I think once, if it gets to that stage and those teams are in, that's really good. I like the Japan Saudi Arabia game is really interesting, and the game will already be played by the time I think this comes out. But when you look at, because Saudi Arabia plays a very aggressive style of attack, and they kind of play a system that you wouldn't expect a team of that kind of lacks quality to play. They're very aggressive on defense. They press high, and they're constantly moving. And I think that kind of falls perfectly into the Japan style of play with short passing and quick ball movement, where they're going to be able to kind of penetrate the Saudi Arabian defense. But I think that game is really interesting when you look at two teams who made the World Cup and who to meet up in the round of 16 in the Asia Cup, probably the best matchup that's remaining. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see who continues to go, and if any of these teams that we kind of consider favorites trip up.
The one last thing that I'll say about this is I do want to give a shout out to Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan going up against UAE, of the two countries that are not sports powers whatsoever. It creates a really interesting matchup for a level like this. UAE, they won their group, that group with India, but Kyrgyzstan was in the same group with South Korea and China. And China's, again, finally coming out of the woodwork to play. But Kyrgyzstan had the lead against China, and then they blew it in the second half after an own goal kind of derailed Kyrgyzstan in that opening game. And then they lost only 1-0 to South Korea after a really bad turnover that South Korea, they probably should have drew with South Korea. And then Lux comes in and gets a hat trick against the Philippines to round it out and to move them in as a third-place qualifier. I think that game, just in case if you just want to see something wacky and to have some free time, if you get a chance to watch that game, I think it will be probably the most fun out of all the ones to watch the rest of the way out.
Yeah, who are you picking to win, or who do you want to win?
In that game specifically, or in all of this?
The tournament, all of this.
I wouldn't mind seeing Iran win it, mostly because, like if you take the politics out of Iran and just all the situations, because it feels weird just kind of rooting for an Iranian team as an American. But when you look at Iran and what they've done, they've shown a lot of depth. They've shown a lot of resilience with their soccer team, and that they're willing to mix some different things up. I think, with the exception of Japan and maybe Australia, they probably have the more versatile teams. And I think that when it comes down to the coaching strategies, Iran can do more things with their roster than anybody else on that side of the bracket as a whole. So I would probably pick Iran, but they're going to have to be diligent once they get up to the semifinals and finals. If not, then I'm going to root for, me, I root for anarchy. So bring on the stands.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because my team is also Iran.
Oh, really? I don't think we've ever agreed on this before.
It's Iran. And it's pretty simple why. I had a great time watching Iran games with Iranians during the World Cup. They were really nice, so friendly. Reminded me so much of Mexican culture, and I had such a great time. So because of that, I'm backing them for the Asian Cup.
Awesome. Well, we'll take a break.
I'm a simple man.
It works out. We'll take a break, and when we return, we'll have more here on Your Soccer Passport.
This is Rachel Mullins, host of #NoFilterFriday here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my new show, #NoFilterFriday, where we talk about all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around Hollywood. A new show drops every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of #NoFilterFriday. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media, sponsored by Squadcast.fm. I'm Brice Burge, Ivan Sanchez Carrasco 2. Follow us on Twitter at Ivan Sanchez C90 and at that Brice Burge, Brice with an I. Lots of additional commentary there, as well as our show handle at Your Soccer Pass. All right, let's talk a little bit about coaching things. Got some awkward situations to deal with, is probably the best way to describe it. We'll start down under. In Australia, Alan Stashik fired before the World Cup. Some very confusing reports coming out of it just because the players have shown a number of supportive texts, but the reasons to fire Stashik was made on the basis of two confidential surveys, one from the Australian Professional Footballers Association and the other by Our Watch, which is an Australian organization which aims to end violence against women. There had also been conversations with players and team staff. This is according to the AP story on this. They did say that further details could not be expressed because of confidentialities and workplace environment. Interesting report, to say the least. What do you get out of that, Ivan?
I get out that it had to be something super serious for them to fire probably their most successful coach the Australian national team has had, and to do it just like 5 months away from the World Cup, in which Australia, a team that kind of not favorites, but definitely that second tier of quality teams, a team that can make a really deep run. And he's probably seen them. He's taken Australia probably to their greatest of heights and kind of turned them into a very good quality national team. So I think for them to fire him on so close to the World Cup with a project he's been working with now for years, it had to be something serious and something that I guess to do it in the manner in which they did, the time frame and everything, there's not a lot of details out, but you figure it had to be something pretty serious.
Yeah, that's the only way that I think that you can look at it, because the way that it sounds is that it's almost like it's away from the players. It's not necessarily a situation that would be involved with like abusing a player or something like that. Not like a Rutgers basketball type thing. but a situation where things have deteriorated in other aspects, whether that be working with the Football Association, working with staff members that are relevant. They did elaborate in some of the other reports saying that that things have deteriorated quickly, that this is a recent thing in that regard. So that's interesting of note, just because, again, you've got the Matildas here in the quarterfinals of the 2015 World Cups and the Olympic Games and the finals of the Asian Cup. They were the Terminations winner in 2017 because of being able to beat the United States in that one. So that was the last time the United States lost, before the loss to France that we talked about in the first segment. So you have this situation now, and it's just a little odd because of who knew about it and who didn't know about it. Because Ross Moriarty, the chair of the Women's Football Council in Australia, said they had no idea of the sudden decision to fire Stashik. And so you've got that too, where it's just now the rumor mongering allows so many different opportunities, as well as the fact that the Australian season for club stuff is starting to pick up again. And so there's just a ton of different ripple effects here where people don't know which way to head because of this announcement. But now that they're heading into the World Cup, they're left without a coach, they're left without stability, and this is not a good situation for Australia heading into this World Cup.
Yeah, and I think things will become more clear with time, and it'll be interesting to see how the Australian Soccer Federation continues with the hire, how the players react to it as well on the field, and things of that nature. It would be a shame for the team to really suffer off on the field from this, and hopefully this isn't they get off on the wrong foot starting already for entering the World Cup for them.
Let's switch things over to a different controversy, a Spygate controversy. Yes. Oh, you are excited about this one. Do you want to give the backstory, or do you want me to give a backstory and allow you to talk about it?
You can do the backstory. You'll probably explain it better.
Okay, all right. So we're going to Leeds, which is in the EFC, and so the championship division in England. And so they're in the lead by a lot. They've got 4 points on second place right now over Norwich. Not anymore. They're only 1 point ahead of Norwich City, but they're way clear on everybody else at this point. So they look like they're going to be promoted. And their manager, Marcel Bielsa, is in there, and he's been so important to the success of this team. Well, they found out a lot of that is because they've been watching their opponents' practices. It's very much Josh McDaniels 2000 whatever New England Patriots nonsense with watching the other team practice. So that way you can see what they're planning to do. You can watch it, and then you can make adjustments based on what that is to better outcome your position, whether it be in a counterattack or whether it can be in just a better defense or anything along those lines. If you know what's coming, it makes it easier to coach against. Typically, it doesn't matter which sport that it is, it does at all. You don't watch another team practice. It's usually illegal in either breaking the rules of the organization, or actually in some countries it's against the law. And so in this case, it's just poor form and poor sportsmanship with penalties assessed potentially. So this has all happened. So I'm gonna take a break and get your initial thought process to that, and then I'm gonna come back to what Bielsa did afterwards, just to continue with how ridiculous the situation is. But I want to know your opinion first. Spygate, EPL style.
You're bearing the lead. The best part is what he did after. That's my favorite part.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I can keep on going. I can keep on explaining.
No,
if you want.
I think
Or do you want to take off from here?
Yeah, well, I'll take off from here.
Okay.
So Marcel Bielsa they call him el loco in Spanish, which means crazy. And he admitted that. And so number one, I believe it's not against the rules to spy. It's just kind of frowned upon. And he's admitted to doing it everywhere he's coached. And he's kind of, people who don't know him, he's very eccentric, very detail oriented. When he coached Atlas, my Mexican team, in the 90s, he would watch every game over and over and just watch the different players to see what they did. So he would watch one soccer game 20 times to see what every player did, his team and then the other teams. So he's very detail oriented. And so then Frank Lampard, who played for Chelsea, England legend, who's the coach of Derby County, who complained about the spying and everything, made comment of that. And this is my favorite part. Later that week, Bielsa had a press conference, and he gave a 70-minute report on every player that Frank Lampard's team. He essentially just gave everybody else in the league everything, all the information that he knew about Frank Lampard's team. That's my favorite detail about this story, is that he sat 20 reporters in this room and just gave a description about everything Frank Lampard's team does, what every player does, what they've been doing, and what they expect him to do. And I love it. I love it. I love it. And part of the reason why I love it, there's a little bit of kind of arrogance or snottiness sometimes, I think, from the English media and players when it comes to the Latin player and or the Latin coach. And the fact that Bielsa just absolutely schooled Frank Lampard, it's delicious. I want more of this. I love it. I just think it's just a perfect way to kind of put Frank Lampard back in his place.
Well, the thing is, you say it in one way. I see it as a completely different scenario in that this guy is way over the top. But when you look at the tweets by both Leeds' official Twitter profile as well as all the journalists that were in the room, they were blown away by the amount of extra stuff in there. So not only do you have what you just pointed out, all this information, any kind of information that you could potentially dream about this organization is out there. But that means if everybody's got that information, how can he be in trouble anymore? Like, there is still potential for things to be assessed against the team, but the problem is that you don't have a competitive advantage anymore because you just gave it to everybody. So, I mean, you basically... It's like spying and then putting it on WikiLeaks with this information, because now everybody has it. You do not have a tactical advantage anymore by having this extra information, and you supplied additional ones to show what your process is. So not only that, it's a little bit of like Spygate, a little bit of Moneyball, and a little bit of WikiLeaks all mixed into one. And then you bring in, and that's just from the defensive standpoint. That's like, I don't want to get in trouble. Leeds is at the top of the table, and we could get promoted. We don't want to lose out on a potential promotion gig out of this with all of the millions of dollars and euros and pounds that come with getting that promotion status. That is huge. So now you've got basically this entire situation where you've got a little bit of like putting Rampart in his place, but a lot of we just went into the court of public opinion because we do not want to be in the court of anything else. And this is completely unheard of territory in any sports story that I've ever heard. I've never heard of anybody going out and being so proactive about a potential information violation like this and be with it. So this is brand new worldwide.
Yeah, I think it's a little more. I don't know if it's new. I just think maybe I kind of knew of something similar. You kind of heard these stories already before with Bielsa from the Spanish media and stuff. I just think it's more newer to the English audience. I think that's what it is too. I think that's the other fact. I think it's interesting to see how we both see the same situation, but we see it differently too. But I love it. I think it's great. He just gave every other team all the information on Derby County that he has. I mean, I'm pretty sure he even knows what each player from Derby County was eats for dinner. It was so detailed, and I think it was brilliant, masterful, and I need more Biens. I need more of Marcelo.
Just to bring that up, Derby County has had a very weird year where they actually went out and beat Man U in the FA Cup at one point, but they've also had 8 losses in Championship where pretty much all of them were bad. But they still sit 6th in the standings right now, just 1 point behind West Brom and Middlesbrough for 4th place, 4 points behind Sheffield United for 3rd. So, I mean, it is amazing in that regard. Of just how big of a swing that it comes along, but who knows what happens for Derby County the rest of the time? I mean, Hull City and Swansea are both within striking distance. Blackburn too, as well as Birmingham, because I forgot how deep that gets. At 8, 9, 10 are all tied for position. So, it's amazing when you look at those teams and just how big of a cluster this becomes on the standings and how it impacts the other teams. I do think it's different. I do think it's a different potential scenario, but I like that. I've always enjoyed the fact that you get more information out there, and we've seen in other leagues opportunities for it, like when J.J. Watt matched all of the snap counts from watching Hard Knocks. Like we've seen this from other people, finding information in unique ways. It's just a matter of how it's applied.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. Great story. What a great way to end the show too. Something we needed. A little lighthearted, a little serious, but masterful job by Marcelo, and I love it. And I can't wait to see them in the EPL next year.
Well, on that positive note, Ivan, we'll wrap up this week's show of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media, sponsored by Squadcast.fm. Let's hear it. What's your shout-out for this week?
Marcelo Bielsa. Keep it going, baby. Keep it going.
That's lame. I'm not going to accept that. Have a new shout-out. We just talked about him for that last segment. You got to have the shout-out be different.
All right. Shout-out MLK. Happy MLK Day, everybody. Hope you had by the time this comes out, it'll be yesterday. So hope everybody had a good MLK Day.
Sounds good. All right, remember, you can listen to Your Soccer Passport on Spotify, iTunes, Spreaker, and wherever else your favorite podcasts are found. For Ivan Sanchez Carrasco, I'm Brice Burge. You've listened to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media, sponsored by Squadcast.fm.